Hey everybody, welcome to Monday. And I was going to talk about NFTs today, a topic I've really wanted to leave alone. But after the Square Enix comments about NFTs, I can't leave it alone anymore. But that's going to be tomorrow because I want to talk about something today that I've noticed happening on the internet. And it's one of these socialization things, but it came up again last night. Some of you may know that I periodically go on Nerdette's Newsstand. The host Tristan has me on. She's awesome. Her co-streamers are usually really, really awesome. She has some really interesting guests. But her stream last night went to shit. And I'm not going to rehash why, because that will get away from the point that I want to talk about today. And on YouTube, if anything can derail a point, it will. I want to talk today about the difference between insults and criticism, because part of the reason the stream went to complete shit last night is people didn't know the difference. If you like this sort of, explanation as to how you can improve your social skills on the internet, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Now I say how to improve your social skills on the internet because I truly believe, I'm going to give massive benefit of the doubt here, but this is not just me being nice. I actually think based on some of the behavior I've observed online that some people have come up in really, really abusive environments and they actually don't know the distinction between criticism, fair or not, just straight up criticism, and insults. There is a difference. One is fair game, even if it's scathing. The other is not. The other actually weakens your position in an argument. Obviously, criticism, even if scathing, is fair game. Insults weaken your position because it's often fallacious or deflection or, straight up straw manning, which is a fallacy. So let's start at the beginning here. Insults are defined as speak to or treat with disrespect or scornful abuse. Or a noun, a disrespectful or scornfully abusive remark or action. Whereas criticism is the expression of disapproval of someone or something based on perceived faults or mistakes. Now, you're probably sitting here going, wow, there's a lot of, there's a lot of overlap there. True. All insults could be passed off as a subcategory of criticism. Not all criticism is insults. The difference there is the scorn part. The disapproval, okay? It's the disrespect, right? It's the disrespect. Let's leave the scorn aside. I will focus in on the disrespect because this is a really easy thing to hinge on, to do an A/B switch on. You can go at someone's argument hard with absolute disrespect, with absolute respect, or you can go at it with disrespect, but you can go hard at somebody with respect, right? There are people all the time who spar with each other and really, really dissect each other's points, really hit hard on things. One of the things I like about Tristan, the reason I enjoy going on Nerdette's Newsstand is she's not afraid to disagree on a point of comic books. It's great. I really dislike streams where everybody just kind of agrees quietly. I like that she speaks her mind. We have very different perspectives on a lot of stuff involving comic books. That's sort of her bailiwick. But it's always interesting because she can always defend her points, and criticism, even when it's not very nice, actually deals with the substance of the argument or the product. It provides certain details. It actually addresses the flaws or mistakes, right? An insult doesn't. An insult was just what happened to me in chat last night was I asked a question of the form, basically, hold up, why is this way, but why is this the other way? And I'm being very cautious about the question because it has to do with a certain Nightwing storyline involving Tarantula that triggers a lot of people. If you know what it is, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what it is, that's okay. There are certain YouTube guidelines that I'm trying to skirt here. Yes, this came up on a YouTube stream. So instead of answering my question, which is basically, why was it okay when it happened to a bunch of female comic book characters, but when it's Nightwing, it's angering, which is what the comment in the stream was, a guy responded, that's the stupidest thing anybody said all night. Now, is that criticism or an insult? Well, it's an insult because it doesn't point out any specific flaws in what I've said. And it's very hard to sort of point out flaws in what I said because I was asking a question. Prepared to hear a valid answer. Of course, other people in the chat were like, well, it's because, there's a double standard regarding these things. But this guy kept insisting that I just couldn't accept criticism. And at one point he said, just take the beating. So we know where he's coming from at that point, right? I'm not sure if that was directed at me, but, any guy who would say that in a chat is obviously not coming at things in good faith. But at one point I said to him, at one point it became abundantly clear that he was just strawmanning my position, which was a question, so that he didn't have to admit that he'd taken a cheap shot. And to me, that's the difference between criticism, even brutal criticism, and an insult, is that even brutal criticism doesn't cast, doesn't go out of bounds. Someone asking a question is objectively not the stupidest thing anybody had said all night. I said far stupider things earlier in the chat. One point I joked that, everybody being bisexual in comics is better than everybody being a Skrull. It was a joke, but still, that's a dumb thing to say, right? Why? Because it's apples and oranges. But, it's just objectively not true that anybody asking a question is the stupidest thing in any given YouTube chat. And it was just intended to disrespect. Saying someone said not just a stupid thing, but the stupidest thing anybody had said all night. Way out of bounds. Now, why is this a problem? Why should you care about this? Well, because it undermines your argument, right? It makes you seem like you don't really have an argument, so you're resorting to petty insults, or you've been emotionally rattled and you lashed out. Now, the problem with lashing out when you've been emotionally rattled in that regard is because you've just been a jerk. So, in fairness, you can't really expect anybody to care about your feelings, or you should expect less for anybody to care about your feelings because you just showed you don't care about the feelings of other people. This means it's less likely that you're going to get support when you say your feelings are raw, which is, of course, what this guy did in chat, and nobody responded to that. And I suspect, I know I didn't respond because he didn't really care about other people's feelings. So, and by that point, it had just all gone to shit because the stream was going on and the chat was asking the stream to please stop talking about the subject. But that was because the stream itself had descended into insults. There was a point where some of the other streamers who were co-streaming on their channels as well, and so they had their own super chats, were just reading super chat after super chat just of insults at Tristan. And I'm sitting here thinking, how would I handle that? Because the idea of super chats is you're supposed to read them. That's why people pay money. So they're guaranteed that their super chat will get read, right? But if it's just an insult and unproductive, I'd start reading it and then go, okay, that's an insult, trailing off. So I've seen it, but I'm not just going to fling an insult at someone I'm streaming. And it was one after the other. And everybody I talked to after the fact was basically like, that just made that side of the debate look really petty and bad. And it made it seem like the whole purpose of the stream for those people is to, rack up super chats that were nothing but insults. And that's low quality content, and it's bullying. And nobody agreed with the insults directed at Tristan, at least not among her base, which is, let's face it, the only thing that really matters in those things. Because the people who don't like you are still not going to like you. And you may pick up a few other people from, the counterpoint side who thought you were treated poorly, and, you seem to be decent about it. Now, I left the stream after that because I'm like, this is a bad use of my time. I'm not going to sit here and just watch someone get insulted one after one after one. Now, if it had been criticisms of the argument, that would have been a different story, because criticisms have meat to them. Criticisms have detail. And when something is truly a criticism and not just an insult, you can go, okay, let's look at this. First of all, is what you're saying about me factual? Yes or no? All right, let's assume yes. Is your criticism actually a flaw or just a difference of opinion? I do this on Feedback Friday all the time. And it doesn't matter if it's nice or not, as long as there's detail to it that can be examined. And the core of this is the reason it is respect instead of disrespectful is when you provide detail, when you criticize instead of insult. You are actually opening your own arguments up to criticism, because you're actually providing stuff that people can pick apart. Just telling someone they said a stupid thing, well, what happens? No, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. I mean, what I said is, you didn't actually answer my question. And then, of course, he gave an answer to a question I didn't ask. This is what also tends to happen when someone flings an insult. It indicates that they don't actually understand what they're engaging with. They're not engaging, they're deflecting. And that, to me, is an indication of just, the guy said later it was raw. It was an emotional response. And it's like, well, okay, those are understandable until you attack other people. And then why should anybody care about your feelings? I go back to it. So insults, well, sometimes people do them to be funny. We all like a good Twitter dunk, right? You gotta be careful about it, because even with the Twitter dunks, some I find funny, but after a while, I'm like, okay, this is too much. What the person did wasn't so bad that it deserved that. Like, people have to do something truly awful to be worthy of just straight up dunking, in my mind, because there's too much of it. There's just too much petty bullshit out there. And I personally don't respect people who just decide to add to it. The other thing I think is that no one should ever discourage questioning, especially since questioning is a much softer way of opening up a discussion on something than, I completely disagree, here's why you're wrong, right? It gives the speaker an opportunity to clarify their position, so you don't have to get into that ugliness, which it descended into because it became rapidly clear that that was the purpose of the exercise. But again, the reason you should care about your not nice comments reading as criticism instead of reading as an insult is because fair criticism, even I keep stopping myself from saying fair criticism because it's not about whether it's fair. It's whether it's detailed. Somebody's like, you're totally wrong and this is why, and you list details, even if it's completely unfair because either it wasn't the crux of the argument or it was just a bunch of things I didn't actually say. I'm like, this is fair game. It doesn't matter if someone's angry, as long as they're actually prepared to come up to the plate and provide some structure that I can respond to. As long as they do that, I don't care how scathing they are. Like, this is terrible and that. And when things become hyperbolic to the point of absurdity, I cannot take a person seriously. And that's why I was amused by, that's the stupidest thing anybody said all night, when I know full well that I said stupider things, 20 minutes earlier, deliberately, right? And at that point, the person really doesn't have a decent argument. They are just looking to hurt. And intents are very difficult to determine online sometimes, which is why I didn't lead with intention regarding insults and criticism. I led with structure. Because of that fact that a lot of people who have been raised in truly abusive environments think that's the stupidest thing I've heard all night is criticism, not an insult. And I really do have empathy for people who were raised in those brutal environments because it is holding them back in social and professional situations because they don't know how to communicate in a way that actually communicates their intent. And I'm learning a lot lately, this might be this isn't a Wellness Wednesday topic, but this might be a thing we talk about on Wellness Wednesday, the ways being abused hamstring you going forward. And this is one of them. When people have been raised in abusive environments and told it's criticism designed to make them better, they then don't see anything wrong with going out and treating other people the way they were treated. It's the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto you. This was done to you. You've been trained to believe it's okay. Therefore, you don't understand the negative reaction. So sometimes someone can fling an unintentional insult because they don't know it's insulting. But if you actually think about it, what does something like that add to the conversation? Nothing. All it does structurally is demean someone. Now, people often don't think about the structure of their language, which is something I challenge everybody to do. Really think about the structure of your language. Too many people say something meaning another thing. And there are some people in my life, it drives them absolutely crazy that I'm so literal in what I say. But I stand by that because it's not fair, especially with the number of, neuroatypical people I deal with, to say one thing that is code for another thing. That's causing other people to do just too much work. And when it comes to something like criticism, the reason for projecting the criticism is something people can do some introspection on, right? Highly critical people do it as sort of a shield against the world. But people who don't intend to be critical and they're just copying language, they probably feel like they get ignored a lot. And here's why. When you fling mean words that add absolutely nothing to a dialogue, well, you deserve to be ignored because all you're doing is being aggressive, and you're not being aggressive in a way that adds to the debate. So what's the proper counter move for a guy just charging at you, right? You sidestep and you let him keep running. And maybe, if it's a fighting game, give him a little knock in the back as he goes by, right? That's the correct tactical move. Whereas if somebody comes at you with detail, issues that they have with your argument, and you ignore or worse, block them, well, then you look bad, right? So tactically, it's better to stick to criticism and avoid insults, And one thing, like if he thought what I said was stupid, the best thing to go is, hold on, what do you mean by that? Because it sounds like what you're saying is, that's a great way to object to what you understand someone's saying without strawmanning them. Because the minute you strawman someone's argument, especially if you're being insulting doing it, you've lost. You've lost the debate in the eyes of spectators. The minute you start taking a cheap shot, you start losing hit points. And online debates are a question of hit points. And you can self-own pretty easily in an online debate by doing stuff like this, by coming on too aggressive and missing the big swing, opening yourself up for a really, really painful counter move. Because, once you come out aggressive, you have to be prepared to be met with the same level of aggression. Otherwise, you're dishing it out and you can't take it. And the problem with people who communicate unintentionally in this insulting way, and instead of a meaningful criticism, instead of a truly critical way, instead of just an insulting way, is they don't know they're insulting, so they don't understand the aggression they get as a response to their insult. Now I didn't do that to that guy. I just kept pressing. You didn't answer my question. And then I said, you're strawmanning my argument now. And of course the guy got more and more and more pissed until finally he admitted that it was raw and nobody cared. And I felt bad for the guy. I felt bad for the guy because I identified that there was an emotional reaction there, but he was not helping himself, and you cannot reward the flinging of unproductive insults. And I keep avoiding using fair or constructive because there's a difference between constructive and productive, right? Someone can say something that's super mean, but if there's a couple of valid points in there, it can still lead to a productive dialogue. I mean, look at all the people who are on the pro Gamergate side that still subscribe to my channel because they weren't necessarily super nice to me. And they took some comments I said that were not intended to offend anybody. They took some comments I said very personally. And so they came at me very, very angry. But they provided enough detail in their not very nice criticisms that I could go, okay, hold up here. Let's set aside the mean stuff and actually address the detail of your argument. You can do that. It doesn't matter if somebody's nice. Now, okay, not everyone on the internet is as thick-skinned as I am. I'm not saying that that detail in your criticism means you will automatically get addressed no matter how mean you are. Some people just go hater. If you lace your productive criticism with insults, you're not maximizing your chances of success. And this is what the intention of this video is for people who don't realize that they're actually just being insulting when they think they're being critical. These tend to be people who feel very ignored, who feel sidelined by online debates, who feel like their voice doesn't matter. And the reality is they're right. Their voice doesn't matter because they're not using it effectively. That thing they think is politics of identity or, just somebody being a snob is actually a reflection sometimes of behavior that people have the right to not reward. And the thing you have to keep in mind online is that nobody is required to talk to you. And not only is the person you're attacking less likely to want to talk to you if you just fling purposeless insults instead of, debating with productive criticism, even when it's mean. The people who see it are less likely to want to engage with you or want to consume your content when it's just cheap insults too. There are some people that I don't like their style of speaking online, but I do think they make some interesting points. There are a lot of New York Times columnists, a lot of National Post columnists, some CBC columnists. I absolutely cannot stand their style. I find them smug and sneering, and they take too many cheap shots. But there's enough detail in their criticisms of various policies or political figures or, even game reporting or game reviews, right? Like we talked about that Jason Schreier article last week, and everybody agrees, anybody with half a brain knows that Jason Schreier is, the reputation among other people in games journalism. The first word that comes out of people's mouths regarding Schreier is he's an asshole, but he's a pretty good reporter. And every Jason Schreier article is the asshole going to come out, or is the good reporter going to come out? What's the asshole to awesome ratio on this piece? And, there's a guy who has legit skills who keeps hurting himself because he relies on insults, and he's clearly got a really thin skin. And insults make you seem like you have a thin skin. Whether you do or don't, you rely on insults, you seem thin-skinned because you can't fight fair. But yeah, that is the opinion of Jason Schreier among other journalists. Even journalists who are as big an asshole as he is, it's so weird. It's like, oh wow, an asshole's calling another guy an asshole. It's like watching a pigeon poop on another pigeon or a seagull shit on another seagull, right? Like this is like, whoa, the circle of life, man. But think about how much more powerful these voices would be if they cut the bullshit and just kept the good stuff, right? They'd be far more persuasive. And I really don't think that their traffic would drop that much because Schreier's not primarily known as an opinion writer. He's an investigative reporter. We need more of those in gaming. But his reporting, especially when it relies on a lot of anonymous sources, would be far, far more compelling if he didn't seem to hate his subject matter with a fiery passion. And that's what insults do. They make you seem emotional instead of just passionate, right? Negatively emotional, angry or wounded or, emotions that mean you're not thinking clearly. Instead of just passionate enough about the subject that passion may have gotten away from you and you may have got at someone a little too hard. Or totally totally fairly gone at somebody hard. Like if somebody says something that you find hurtful, it's totally fine to passionately argue why you found it hurtful, right? And I actually think that and this is, let me pose this question to you because this is something I'm not sure about, but it's a hypothesis of mine that people who resort to insults actually aren't good at handling criticism themselves. And an insult sort of ends a dialogue, whereas criticism opens it up. And that's part of the knee jerk, is they just want the scary thoughts to stop. And so they do something that, slams on the brakes and burns out the tires. What do you think about that? I'm very interested. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for watching.